Recording. Good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad you're here. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for Thought Leadership in Social Media, a virtual workshop hosted by the Women's Thought Leadership Program at Texas Women's University. As folks roll in, we just have some information to get us started. I am going to place in the chat a link to our webpage if you'd like to learn more and go over just a few quick things there. The Women's Thought Leadership Program, or WTL, aims to empower Texas Women's University students to take the knowledge and skills developed while earning their degrees and translate those skills to the public, while also offering skills and strategies to enhance and communicate their credibility as thought leaders. We do this in several ways. We offer a Right to Change the World fellowship program that supports and guides students through the process of developing, writing, and pitching an op-ed or opinion editorial about a pressing issue. We host public events such as this one that feature thought leaders that can help build knowledge, skills, and leadership capacities. And we facilitate pedagogy workshops in which we work with educators who wish to integrate public scholarship activities into the classes we teach. This work, of course, would not be possible without a wide range of support. We want to thank the J. Nelson Institute for Women's Leadership at TWU, who has generously funded the Women's Thought Leadership Program. We also receive resources from Language, Culture, and Gender Studies, our department. And I also want to offer our continued gratitude to our graduate students who are fabulous and wonderful and here with us today and will be helping Jennifer Connor and Juliet Holder. Their skills and expertise in supporting our programming throughout the year. We just simply could not do it without them because they are so wonderful and so gifted. And also like to thank my faculty co-lead for this semester, Dr. Rima Abanasser, who has dedicated great time and energy to helping to make this event possible as well. A few reminders before we get started. If you could, please mute yourself during the workshop unless you are intending to speak. For this, we encourage you to use the raise hand function. We will be looking for that and doing our best to manage the raised hands. We also want folks to know that this event is being recorded, so that's just something to be aware of. And we are saving the last 45 minutes or so of this event for audience questions and discussion. So we welcome, posting questions in the chat, and we'll be keeping an eye on those, addressing as many as we possibly can during the Q&A. And so without further ado, I get to hand it over now to one of my colleagues, Dr. Ana Louise Keating. So Dr. Keating, here's the figurative mic, and we'll let you introduce our workshop host.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. I am so delighted to introduce to you today Dr. Tara L. Conley. I've known Dr. Conley since, wait for it, August 2007, like not in the 20s at all, when she entered our master's program in women's studies here at TWU. She took a number of courses with me, and I directed her master's thesis, which was titled Confronting and Transforming the Foe Within, an Application of Nepantla Theory. Even back then, Tara sought and created innovative ways to integrate social justice issues concerning intersections of race, gender, region, and class into her scholarship, thus making her work both transformational and widely available. In other words, she's not just writing for other academics, but instead she's taking her work out into the world, and she's been quite successful in doing so. Let me count the ways. Dr. Conley is currently an assistant professor of media and journalism at Kent State University. She is also a filmmaker and former race and technology practitioner fellow at Stanford University. She's also a published scholar and author with bylines appearing in Bloomsburg News, Ebony Magazine, Ms. Magazine, and Zora Magazine. She's also appeared on MSNBC and presented lectures on race, feminism, and media across the country. In 2013, she founded #Feminism to document feminist discourse on Twitter. In 2015, she produced the documentary Brackish about life in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Dr. Conley is currently working on a full-length documentary film titled Dry Bones, which is about Maxwell, a legendary Black high school football player from, I might say this wrong, Elria, Ohio. So you see even there that beautiful mix of academic and much larger public discourse that can really intervene in and transform. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Connolly.
Oh, wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Keating. I can't, I'm going to try not to cry. I'm just super, super emotional all the time, but this does feel like a complete, 360 moment coming back full circle. So thank you so much for that. And thank you all for joining. Thank you, Jackie, Agatha, and the rest of the team representing the Women Thought Leadership at TWU. I can't tell you how excited I am to be back in this space, albeit virtually, with my alma mater. As Dr. Keating mentioned, it was a while ago, maybe 2007, 2008, when I was at Denton at Texas Women's University, and it was one of the most just fulfilling experiences. And I can't tell you how much the folks there mean to me. And again, I'm just really happy to be. All right, so before kind of getting into the work here, I do want to introduce myself again and kind of expand on what Dr. Keating just wonderfully and lovely introduction. As Dr. Keating mentioned, I am currently an assistant professor in the School of Media and Journalism at Kent State University in Ohio, in Northeast Ohio. Prior to coming to KSU, actually, this past school year, I was at Montclair State University in New Jersey for about 4 years. The pandemic, as I'm sure many of you, this could resonate with you as well. The pandemic kind of shifted my priorities. I wanted to be closer to home, and I wanted my work and my creative scholarship to reflect the work in my community where I'm from. So I can talk a little bit more about my research, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you have for me during the Q&A. But in addition to that, I was 2020, 2021 Race and Technology Practitioner Fellow at Stanford. And I used that year to work with young people across the country to develop a digital toolkit called Ruby. And the purpose of Ruby, named after Ruby Bridges, is to create tools for young people in high school and undergrad to advance racial justice education in their school districts. And I can talk a little bit more about that work as well toward the end of the workshop. Yes, and as Dr. Keating mentioned, I did my master's thesis. It was kind of like an arts activist scholarly inquiry kind of project. I created a docu-poem, a visual kind of rendering of the Gina 6 situation back in 2006, 2007. So I've always had this, I've always had this proclivity toward interdisciplinary kind of scholarship and work, bringing in creative visual arts with scholarly inquiry. And that's kind of like how I've been rolling for all these years. So I come into this space in particular, having learned with and collaborated with a generation of young people who have, born in this 21st century with social media and online media and an information economy. And I learned from my students all the time. I learned from young people that I work with in the community. And so I take very seriously the role of media and technology in our lives, in our everyday lives. So this presentation, obviously, I'm going to share some tips with you and provide a little bit of an overview of some of the social media platforms that I think we're all sort of familiar with. At the same time, I also want to impart that I'm very critical about these technologies as well, and we can talk a little bit about that too. But I want to make sure that create a space for us to learn about how these tools can be used for thought leadership. That's a very broad term. We can talk about that too, but also keeping in mind that these technologies are not neutral, and they do enhance and limit and constrain, folks' lives, and we can definitely talk about that as well. So with that being said, I guess I should have had this one on, this slide on. There is a QR code that you are more than welcome to scan right now. The QR code will redirect you to some resources from this presentation. Once you become redirected to the website, you'll see that there's a prompt to insert a code, SM4TL, which is also the hashtag. If you would like to have a conversation across social media, please use this hashtag. But you can access all of those resources on the website using that code. And I'll come back to these resources at the end of the presentation. The QR code will come back again. So with that being said, and yes, when you're redirected to the web page, you'll also notice there is an area to sign up for my newsletter. I would love to keep in touch with you all, and also see who's downloading some of the resources. I'm also in the process of writing my first book, and I would love to keep you all abreast of that as well. So yes, if you have any issues, please let me know, but hopefully everything's working on the back end. All right, let's get into it. So one thing I want to mention before we started in the workshop, I wanted to kind of get a sense of what folks were interested in, especially when it comes to what kind of platforms folks want to learn about, what kind of different skills they would like to learn. So we have the opportunity to send a very brief survey. Not a lot of folks filled it out, but we're going to use it as a representative sample. One of the questions was, which of the following topics is of interest to you? And it's kind of across the board. So we have social media thought leadership, obviously, social media movements on the web, storytelling on the web, online activism, and social media activism and pedagogy. So what I tried to do was customize this workshop to touch on all of those different topics of interest. There may be some things that you all would love to talk about and share. Please keep that in mind for the Q&A. But for the most part, this is kind of where we're going to be, what we're going to be talking about today. The other question was, are there any specific platforms that you engage with regularly that you're very interested in learning more about? For the most part, for this particular sample, Instagram was, I would say, the most popular platform of interest. I'm going to talk a little bit about Instagram, obviously, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. If there's not a platform on here that is representative of what you would like to discuss, please feel free to ask any questions during the Q&A. I know a good bit about these different platforms, but I will say I'm more of a Twitter person than anything else. I'm reluctantly getting back on TikTok, and I can talk more about that as well. And certainly how other academics and students are using TikTok, are using Instagram, Facebook, and even Twitter to advance sort of their scholarly work or their pedagogical practices. So we will definitely talk about that. All right. I like to do an icebreaker. I know this is going to be somewhat of a challenge given that the medium that we're dealing with, but I do ask that if you can respond to either one of these prompts in the chat box. I'll take a look at some of the responses that come in, and then we can kind of see where you all land on some of these questions. So the first question is, what was your first social media profile name and the story behind it? If that question isn't your jam, I have another one. Describe your earliest memory using social media. All right, so I will model some of these responses, and I tend to ask these questions to my students at the beginning of the semester, and it always yields some really cool stories. So for the first one, what was your first social media profile name, the story behind it? So mine goes way back to 1995 when my family first purchased our first computer, desktop system. It might have been an IBM computer. And I remember getting on America Online for the first time in the chat rooms, if anybody remembers those days. And my first profile name was Friday 025. And Friday was my favorite day of the week. We are in Friday today, and 025 was my favorite basketball number because Mark Price played for the Cleveland Cavaliers and his numbers was 25, and I just love Mark Price. And so I combined two things that I love, and Friday 025 has been a screen profile name for me for a very long time. And one of my earliest memories of using social media, one of them, because there's tons of them, I remember using Black Planet and MySpace.com and learning how to code through the using MySpace and coding and making my page all pretty and glittery. So that was one of my first memories. So I see there's some other folks here. I'll read some of the ones that are coming through. Beth says, I'm not sure I remember, probably Xena 5 back okay, yes, the Xena official forums, preteen, awesome. Another one, Dr. Carla, first social media profile name, Salai Ride. The story behind is connecting to my Ethiopian heritage. Fantastic. Josh, another MySpace, earliest memory using MySpace. Yes. Putting the creative touches on the layouts. Absolutely. Aisha of Black Planet, hot in Jersey. That's actually my bestie right there. So I remember those days living in Houston, Texas, for sure. Amanda, I first had a MySpace username, something along the lines of Jitterbug. Nice. Jackie, a MySpace account, couldn't figure out how to use it, but you still remember it, so that's cool. Brandy, MySpace, nice, but that's where you met your husband. Fantastic. And you're up and you're celebrating your 15th wedding anniversary. Congratulations on that. Dr. Carla remembers the AOL chats as well. I'm going to continue to look through those for sure. Please add your memories, earliest memories. One of the reasons why I asked this question is not only to just get us thinking about the topic at hand, obviously, but also to kind of reflect on how much social media and online media has been so much embedded in our lives. Even for those of us who are not necessarily considered digital natives or folks born in the 2000s with the smartphones already in our hands when we're toddlers. I'm definitely not a digital native, but online media, social media, communicating with other folks across the country just using my computer at the time played a big role in my life and growing up in my coming of age era, teenage, post kind of early 20s era. And so now if you compare those moments, the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, to where we are now, we are in a space where we're talking more about artificial intelligence, and we'll definitely have some time to marinate on that a little bit. And so what does social media mean in this era in 2023? And how is it embedded into our lives? And so this is kind of the grounding question that I want us to take with us as we kind of talk about some of these tips and sort of social media implications and consequences and benefits and affordances and all that fun stuff. All right, so I do want to take some time to go over some of the platforms that was mentioned during the survey. Some of this will be, maybe a lot of this will be review for some of you. Some of this will be new information, but I do want to make sure that we all have some kind of grounding on some of the platforms, when they started, what are some things you want to consider when it comes to risks and rewards, okay? All right, so first is TikTok. All right. As I mentioned moments ago, I am not as much on TikTok as maybe I should be. My mother's a huge TikToker. I don't know if that's even what you call them, but she loves TikTok, more so to just scroll through the videos. I wouldn't say she's necessarily a content creator. She has some videos on there, but she's mostly consuming a lot of the videos on TikTok. So as you know, TikTok is a video sharing app. You can upload, share, discover short videos. This was launched by a firm in China called ByteDance in 2016, and they acquired another similarly situated app called Musical.ly in 2017. And I understand too that there's currently a ban on TikTok in Texas, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, you all might know a little bit more about this than I do. From what I understand, if you're not allowed to use TikTok on government issued devices, that doesn't mean folks can't access TikTok, but we can definitely talk about that. Yes, universities have banned it. Thank you. And so I'm going to play a video in a moment that kind of situates sort of the geopolitical issues around TikTok. But so some of the risks and rewards involved in TikTok, obviously, there is concern that TikTok might collect biometric information, depending on where the data is stored. Privacy issues can pop up and can be different from country to country and state to state. Obviously, with the Texas TikTok ban, that is something that is kind of in the forefront of all of our minds right now. That being said, there's also some interesting ways and that I've been like looking at how students and professors and teachers have been using TikTok. In particular, there's some teachers that use the TikTok tool to produce short customized courses for the classroom that students can view later. Some of us like to keep our videos in our course management systems if you're using Canva or some other Blackboard systems. But now we're seeing professors and teachers alike using TikTok as another way to reach students and meet them where they are. Students might also use TikTok in some creative ways, creating video essays. I teach a course on digital video production at Kent State, and the primary course is teaching them how to use Adobe Premiere to edit videos. It's more of a professional video editing platform, but I'm incorporating different techniques on how to use TikTok as well. So because I know this is what a lot of students are using, and this is what a lot of students are using to create content. So before we kind of talk more about some of the risks and rewards, I do want to, hopefully this is gonna play. Yes, there we go. I wanted to play a video that highlights the CEO of TikTok's testimony before Congress last week. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of this. Again, I like to not just talk about the affordances of social media, but also the cultural implications and the political, and in this case, the geopolitical implications of what's happening right now. If you're not aware of what's happening, on March 24th, so that was, I believe, last week, the CEO of TikTok testified before Congress. Congress is, I guess, being very anxious about what TikTok is doing and where they're storing their information. So this is just a highlight. It's about a 5-minute video, but I do want to allow some time for us to watch. And then if you do have any questions or comments, please add them in the chat box. It was 3 minutes, I'm sorry.
Can you say with 100% certainty that TikTok does not use the phone's camera to determine whether the content that elicits a pupil dilation should be amplified by the algorithm? Can you tell me that?
We do not collect body, face, or voice data to identify our users. We do not. The only face data that you will get that we collect is when you use the filters to have, say, sunglasses on your face. We need to know where your eyes are. And
why do you need to know what the eyes are if you're not seeing if they're dilated?
And that data is stored on your local device and deleted after use if you use it for facial. Again, we do not collect body, face, or voice data to identify our users.
I find that hard to believe. It's our understanding that they're looking at the eyes. How do you determine what age they are then?
We rely on age gating as our key age assurance.
Age
gating, which is when you ask the user what age they are. We have also developed some tools where we look at their public profile to go through the videos that they post to see whether...
Well, that's creepy. Tell me more about that.
It's public. So if you post a video, you choose that video to go public, that's how you get people to see your video. We look at those to see if it matches up the age that you talked about.
The 10-year-old girl participated in a blackout challenge, also known as the choking challenge. TikTok actively pushes video on her feed. Unfortunately, this is one of the many devastating examples of children losing their lives because of content promoted by TikTok.
Congressman, as a father myself, when I hear about the tragic deaths of
My question
people, it's
do
heartbreaking.
you find that good faith moderation?
We are very focused on safety, and
Okay,
all these dangerous
I'm gonna have to
challenges
assume
are
that as a
removed when
no.
we find them. There are more than 150 million Americans who love our platform, and we know we have a responsibility to protect them, which is why I'm making the following commitments to you and to all our users. Number one, we will keep safety, particularly for teenagers, as a top priority for us. Number two, we will firewall protected US data from unwanted foreign access. Number three, TikTok will remain a place for free expression and will not be manipulated by any government. Data is stored here in American soil.
Your TikTok employees that live in China, they must cooperate with Chinese intelligence whenever they are called upon. And if they are called upon, they're bound to secrecy. That would include you. So Mr. Chu, if the CCP tells ByteDance to turn over all data that TikTok has collected inside the US, even within Project Texas, do they have to do so according to the Chinese law?
Congressman, first, I'm Singaporean.
That's fine, but there are employees of yours and ByteDance's in China.
We understand this concern. In my opening statement, we said, we hear these concerns, we didn't try to avoid them or trivialize them. We built something where we take that data and put it out of reach.
The Chinese Communist Party is engaged in psychological warfare through TikTok to deliberately influence US children.
All right, so this is the moment that we are in. I definitely would love to hear your thoughts about this particular issue when it comes to the socio-cultural and geopolitical issues around TikTok. But that being said, given the context that we're dealing with TikTok, I do want to highlight some of the ways that, in this case, professors are using TikTok in the classroom. So I've pulled out some examples here. Dr. Harrison uses TikTok to explain research about human behavior, again, in bite-sized chunks. And Dr. Berry, I follow Dr. Berry on Twitter as well, uses TikTok to explain engineering and to talk about experiences as a Black woman in engineering and the engineering field. There's lots and lots of different cases where professors are doing this kind of stuff. And I'm jealous. I wish I could do more of this. But it's worth taking a look at some of these profiles just to see how folks in our profession, in our sector, are using TikTok. Okay. Now I want to move on to Instagram. It seems like Instagram is not as controversial, but of course there are certainly risks and rewards with Instagram as well. It is a video sharing app that allows you to upload images. This was developed in 2010. Back in 2012, Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion. So if you were not aware, Instagram is also part of the Meta company. So some of the things to keep in mind when you are using Instagram, obviously, third-party apps can frequently request your access to your information. And this pretty much goes for all of these platforms. You want to definitely make sure that you're updating your privacy settings, make sure that you're looking at your settings at least once or twice a month to make sure nothing's going on in the back end where your data is being surveilled or collected in ways that you don't want them to be collected and surveilled. In terms of what Instagram has been used for, it's a really good way to reach audiences, obviously through visual media. So how have students and educators been using Instagram? Here's one example. Colleen Darnell is an American Egyptologist who uses Instagram to share knowledge of archaeology and vintage fashion with audiences. I had a chance to kind of scroll through Colleen's feed, and it's gorgeous. The photos are just wonderful. But as she's showing these beautiful photos of herself in these lovely vintage outfits, she's also in the description giving sort of a historical kind of refresher overview of the ways in which different archaeological and vintage fashion kind of intersect. So it's a really interesting way to, again, use visual media in this context. Facebook, obviously, it seems like Facebook is kind of like, because of what's happening with TikTok at the current moment, it seems like Facebook is in the background somewhere, but they're still there. Facebook obviously allows us to connect with families and friends. I'm on Facebook mostly to stay in touch with family and friends. And we know about Mark Zuckerberg as the founder. Some things that you want to keep in mind too about risks and reward, obviously, similar with Instagram and TikTok. Facebook has had some high profile incidents with data privacy issues. You definitely, again, want to make sure that you're checking your settings. Some of the other things you might want to consider too, if you're using Facebook as a public space to curate your scholarship, your research, your teaching, you may want to separate your personal page and create a public page. Researchers often use Facebook to post content and create or participate in groups and create events. They might also use Facebook as a way to recruit research participants. Students have used this in similar ways, creating events and sharing information, although students aren't as much on Facebook as they used to be for obvious reasons. They're on TikTok and Snapchat, for instance. At least my students are for the most part. So this is also something to keep in mind. And then I want to talk a little bit about Twitter. This is my social media platform of choice. But Twitter is going through a lot right now. Obviously, it's if you're not aware, Elon Musk has acquired Twitter, changing it over in terms of the business operations. He acquired it in 2022. And now he's requiring everybody to pay for it. If you want a verification, a blue check mark, you got to pay for it. As recent as yesterday and this morning, there's lots of journalistic organizations, as well as celebrities. I think I just retweeted LeBron James saying he's not going to pay $8 to keep his blue check mark. So if you are on Twitter, please make sure that you're aware of the current sort of business operation models and how it is changing and how Elon Musk is now charging money to be seen, in other words, in this space. You also want to make sure your privacy guidelines are up to date. At any point, things can change. And again, watch this space just as much as watch TikTok. That being said, academics, myself included, have used Twitter over the years to network with colleagues and share information in real time. Students have also been using the platform in similar ways. I follow some students, some former students, some current students who work in the journalism space, and they use Twitter as a way to build their audience. So it's a really good platform for that. But again, keeping in mind the current context and what you want to make sure your privacy and your data is at least being protected in some ways. All right, we will definitely come back to those questions around social media, and I see some folks in the chat are giving some of their thoughts. Please continue. I'd love to hear more during the Q&A. But now I want to transition a little bit into self-presentation and publishing online. I know, having talked with some folks, colleagues, and even graduate students, some who were interested in how to use social media to talk more about their work, but they're a little bit scared about how to do this. So I want to talk a little bit about how to curate your biography. And in the resource section on the website, you'll see some FAQs and some guidelines for curating your biography, but these are just some kind of highlights that I want us to keep in mind and some basic tips. And all of this comes from one of the resources. I believe I have it in the resource section. There's a lovely book on how academics can use social media, and I'll talk more about that toward the end of the presentation as well. So assuming that you want to use social media to build your profile and your professional reputation. So the first step is to curate your bibliography. So this might include uploading a recent image, professional shot if possible. Just make sure the lighting's good, right? Use a handle that is searchable. I don't use my Friday025 handle anymore. I use my full name, and be clear too about what you want to know and who you want to follow. Hashtags are also a lovely way to index and discover conversations that are relative to your work and what you do. So one of the things you want to keep in mind too is if you're trying to use social media to advance more of your research and talk more about your research, you want to think about it, and this is based on Robert Bray, communication specialist, you want to think about it in 3 stages, right? What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the solution that you have found? And what action do you want your audience to take? Okay. So for example, I'm currently writing a book, an epistolary narrative nonfiction book about my hometown, Elyria, Ohio, and the uprising of 1975. And so I'm currently thinking about ways to engage my audience in advance of the book being published. So I might think about it in terms of problem, solution, and action. I haven't necessarily thought specifically about what I would want to do, but given that my primary audience is on Twitter, I can see using these sort of problem, solution, action as a way to get folks interested, and then taking them to my research, whether it be my website or some other resources that they will find useful. Okay. The other thing that we want to think about too is in terms of engagement. So how do you engage folks? That's a word that's been used a lot. I think it's been overused, but let's kind of drill down on what engagement might look like. So there's Silicon Valley's way of engagement, so marketing and advertising techniques. But what I'm talking about here especially is cultivating a community of learning and inquiry. I have Captain Picard in the background because I am a Trekkie, so you might see that gift. You might hear some more Star Trek references. I apologize in advance. But so some themes of engagement and content creation that you want to consider. All right. Obviously the mechanics. So the technical things that you consider on social media, the housekeeping stuff. You want to make sure you're checking your bio, updating your bio. Does it reflect the research, the teaching, your professional work? Have you tagged the place where you work? That's completely up to you. If you all look at my Twitter page, this is my Twitter handle, Tara L. Conley, I have included in my bio Kent State University. And being that I have included my institutional affiliation, I'm very, very careful about some of the things that I say on Twitter, because what I do say represents to the institution. And I don't want that smoke, as what the kids say nowadays. So you want to be obviously strategic about how and what to include in that respect. In terms of your research, do you have any research papers or any kind of research articles showing your impact and accomplishment that you want to point your audience to? If so, what you can do, and I've seen this a lot of times, especially on Twitter, is researchers, professors, even students sharing a snippet of their research findings, and it might be a thread or it might be a video. And this is another way, again, of engaging audiences and asking them questions, even about your research, and having them ask you questions in real time. In terms of the personal content, so this helps people connect with you, obviously. Say something about yourself, post what you're doing, your likes, dislikes. The way that I take on that personal element of engagement, I usually tie it into what's happening in current events and popular culture, especially if I'm watching a award show, or if I'm watching Housewives, because I do watch Housewives. I will figure out how to bring it back to maybe my research and some of the work that I'm doing, and kind of tie it in that way. So that might be also some ways that you can draw on popular culture in particular. Certainly inspirational posts are always lovely, and they might work different according to different platforms. A TikTok inspirational post might be different than a Twitter inspirational post. Academic life, so this is like your workplace culture, things that support your academic life. You might think about quoting a paper and sharing it with others so they can read it as well. That has something to do about your academic life. I'm going to also, in the resource section, there's tons of hashtags that you can follow where a lot of these conversations come up. Engagement and advice. So this is also another way to cultivate a community, basically by asking questions, offering advice, especially to graduate students that are coming up. If you have, if you're faculty, if you're a staff, admin, try to think about reaching out to graduate students, postdocs, offering them some advice about the job market, how to advance some of your research and things like that. Obviously gratitude, showing gratitude is always something important. And I try to do this more often than I should. Saying thank you to your former professors, shouting out your mentors, shouting out your favorite scholars. I've done this a lot. I'm using like a lot of Sylvia Wynter, Toni Morrison in my work, and I will randomly, post quotes from them as I'm doing my work. And that tends to resonate with a lot of my followers as well. Supportive posts, being a good colleague. Find your colleagues online, shout them out, engage with them if they have publications coming out, if they have learning syllabi that they just finished. You definitely want to show some love that way. And then of course, just some fun, random, lighthearted posts. These are all, again, different ways that you can engage and create content through your profiles. Okay, some more tips. Now, maintaining social media presence, that's so you've decided that you want to be in the social media space. What does it mean to maintain that presence? I've done a lot of consulting work with organizations around engagement, and the number one key is always post. Content is king, post. But I also would say that it's not just about the content, it's about the kind of content that you're posting. Everybody's posting content nowadays, right? So you want to think about, what are some of the things that you can do to maintain that social media presence? Obviously, identifying a key audience. Who are the folks that are your people? This could be, folks who share your research interests. These could be your colleagues. Building a social media presence. Here's a kind of a tangible way to think about it. Identify, here I have 50 people, maybe it's 10 people that you want to follow, and create regular content that's interesting to those particular folks, okay? You also might want to use this as an opportunity to translate your research findings or your expertise for a non-academic audience, especially if you're doing a lot of work that ties into popular culture, content, events, current events, things like that. It's a really, really good way to reach folks who are not in the academy or in these professional kind of spaces, and then allowing, to build your audience and expand your audience that way. And I also want to mention too, there's a lot of fear that comes along. I worry too about what I post, and I'm like, oh, should I post that? This is normal. Fear manifests in different ways. So what I will say to you is that avoid posting because you think you should and because you think you need to. If you're feeling that kind of anxiety, maybe just walk away from it. Spending too much time writing or contemplating a tweet or a post might also be a little bit debilitating. Imposter syndrome is a big thing in our world, right? Thinking that other people are so much smarter than you, and what could you possibly add to the conversation? Other ways that it might manifest, fearing that you're being a show off, because you have this paper out, or because you have some techniques that you like to use in the classroom, you might be afraid to share that because you think you're, being a show off. Maybe I'm speaking for myself, but know that you're doing this in the spirit of creating community, and leading with that, I think will be helpful. I lurk a lot. I lurk on hashtags and seeing what my colleagues are talking about. But I also want to try to find ways, again, to build community with folks that I know that are doing great work. Okay. So I do want to spend some time briefly, at least, addressing some toxic behavior that I'm sure many of us either have experienced firsthand or know of others who have experienced firsthand. And so it's important for us to at least, address some of these things. So how do you address toxic behavior online? Obviously, you want to know the platform's policies around abusive behavior. And with a lot of these platforms, the policies are changing, especially with Twitter. It's not there now that Elon Musk has taken over. There's not as tight of a knit guidelines around bullying online. If you find that you're on a platform that you don't feel you're supported, keep that in mind. Seek out other online resources, especially for bullying. Learn about contemporary hate speech scholarship. There's a plethora of wonderful scholarship from folks who are talking about hate speech, who are talking about toxic behavior online. A lot of Black women writers, a lot of Black women feminists have also talked about this. And you don't have to access this scholarship behind paywalls either. You can literally just Google and you'll probably find some wonderful commentary and critical commentary for free online. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over this video a little bit. It just talks a little bit about sort of the feedback loop in social media and how we kind of get trapped in these sort of toxic cycles. It's always best to, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling that you are attacked, it's best to, around these times, it's best to disengage and seek out the platform again, the platform's policies. Some other things to go along with addressing toxic behavior is some ways that you can maintain ethical standards. So this is what you can do. You can only control what you can do. Obviously, the platforms are going to be there, trolls are going to be there, but what can you do to ensure that you're maintaining an ethical professional presence online? One of the things, obviously, is ensuring that all interactions on social media are courteous, professional, and respectful. Let me tell you something. I've had to breathe many times to make sure that I've accomplished one. I've had some interactions with obvious trolls where I've had to just take a deep breath and remind myself not to engage, right? So if you can, just make sure that those interactions are courteous. And if it gets too out of hand, there's block buttons and feel free to use those liberally, right? Understanding and identifying and taking appropriate action obviously is important. If you do find yourself in a situation where you are being harassed, definitely take screenshots and use evidence to support your claims when possible. And certainly be mindful of the limits of your expertise. That's important. I think we're kind of in a world where everyone is an expert and everyone knows everything. I'm of the mind that I know nothing. The more that I know, the less I know. And I come into sort of these spaces with sort of that kind of a humble way of approaching scholarship. There's a lot that I do know about, but I don't know everything. And then again, leading with that sort of ethics is important. Certainly maintaining the privacy of others. This is especially important for folks who are doing any kind of research online. And I would love to talk to you more about that. That's a little bit different from this presentation, but if you do have questions about how to engage in sort of digital ethnography kind of work or doing sort of online collection of data, I'd love to hear about that as well. And certainly maintaining your own personal privacy. We all need to keep, ourselves, have some sort of boundaries that we set up for ourselves as well. Keeping a professional digital footprint and making sure that your expertise are portrayed online accurately. Doing it, Google yourself every once in a while, just to make sure that what's on that first page, especially is representative of what you, your work and sort of your ideas stand for. Knowing that the increased popularity of digital technologies can create additional labor for academics. This is very important, especially for folks who are possibly in the tenure track or having to prove that you have some kind of impact in the world. Keep track of your metrics. I know it sounds like more work, but keep track of the folks that are reading your stuff. I've always seen academics ask, if you've ever used my syllabus online, please let me know, please email me, because I need to keep up with these metrics so I can show my dean that I'm actually doing something. So these are also some other ways of thinking about keeping and maintaining sort of a professional presence. Okay, so those are just some of the kind of broad strokes of not self-publishing, but thinking about maintaining a social media presence. Now, I do want to get into some of these tools that you can use for self-publication online. Some of these I have used, some of these I have not used, but I've heard about them and they seem to work. So what are some ways that you can publish your work or anything that you're working on online? So some of the more, I guess, popular platforms that are kind of happening right now. Substack. So these are subscription-based platforms. Substack is basically sort of a digital newsletter that you can send directly to subscribers. And I think for some you can charge for that as well. For some, I think you can submit free content. Patreon is another source. You might hear your favorite podcast at the end or the beginning of the podcast. They'll say, support our podcast by subscribing to our Patreon page. It is another membership platform, okay, that provides, so again, business tools for you to do that kind of work. And when I say self-publication, I'm not just privileging the text format here. I'm thinking too about audio, visual content. Again, these are all different ways that you can publish online. Professional websites, obviously, are a more traditional kind of legacy media and online space. If you have newsletters, you might think about incorporating a weekly, bi-monthly newsletter for folks on your that can visit your professional website. My professional website is powered by Squarespace. It works for me so far. I've used WordPress in the past, and there's a bunch of other websites where they have templates that you can use to create your website. I think it's useful. It's always nice to be able to send someone a link to what you're doing. Obviously, creating blog posts, it's so funny because an assignment that I gave to my students last semester was to create a blog post about a film analysis. And students were like, what's a blog? so I was shocked by that, but I'm like, okay, yeah, the world is moving super fast. It needs to slow down a bit. So blogs, I guess, are considered like a legacy kind of media now, but I still think it is another useful space, especially if you have a website where you can do more of that sort of self-publication online. Medium is an online publishing platform where, again, it's kind of like a bloggy platform, but it's a little bit more professional, kind of uses the professional fonts. I published on there a few times, and I published with students as well. And it's, again, a nice way to get your work out there, relatively free, obviously, and with good SEO or search engine optimization analytics. Some podcast publishing platforms. I don't talk too much about podcasting, but I know it's a huge medium that a lot of academics especially, and students as well are using. Obviously, YouTube, Buzzsprout, Anchor, which is now Spotify, just bought by Spotify, SoundCloud, and some other publishing platforms are useful. I've used Anchor, which is now Spotify, before, and I've used obviously SoundCloud and YouTube. The other ones I have not, so I can't speak on them, but if you have any other platforms that you've used and would like to share, please do. Okay, so I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about some pedagogies and using online media. So diversifying our little pedagogical profile a bit, thinking about how these tools can be used to advance our teaching and learning practices. All right, so one of the questions I get asked often is, how can online media be used as tools for advancing teaching and learning practices? A few ways. So these are some of the tools that I've used in my classroom. Some of them are pretty basic. You've seen them before, I'm sure. Google Docs. At my university, we use Microsoft, and not to hate on Microsoft, but I'm just not a Microsoft person, so I do miss using the Google Docs more often, but I still use Google Docs for sending documents to students, and they have access to them, obviously. A way to crowdsource teaching materials as well. You might see some sample syllabi floating around online where other professors use Google Docs as a way to send some of those sample syllabi. I also do a virtual scavenger hunt exercise with my students. And actually my online, my feminist media course, where they can access the prompts and everything using Google Docs. I just find it as a very simple kind of interface. Some other design platforms. So this is a little bit different. Canva, which is what I'm using right now, is absolutely wonderful. It's kind of a lay person's graphic design platform, lots of wonderful templates. If you want to have more options, you have to obviously pay for it, but it might be something where some of you might be able to have your university or institution pay for the subscription. Again, it's just a really lovely design platform for doing any kind of visual sort of presentation and work. Padlet is a cloud-based software where you can collaborate on the web and upload and organize different content on a virtual bulletin board called Padlets. I use Padlet. I've used it in the past in my classrooms, but I actually use it to do storyboards for my film. So when I'm talking with my team, my filmmaking team, we've used Padlet to create sort of a storyboard or a mood board of what a scene might look like. And you could also use Canva for that as well. Tiki-Toki might be a little bit different. You may not have heard it. I use it often in the class. It is a mapping, an interactive timeline mapping tool. Again, if you want to use more of the functions, you should have to pay for it, but there is a free version where you can use it in the class if you want to show a timeline of something. If you're teaching about some historical events, or you need to see progress over time, Tiki-Toki is a really, and it's lovely to say too, Tiki-Toki. It's a lovely tool to use. Poll Everywhere is a polling kind of platform, call and response that I've used plenty of times to collect student response in real time. Actually, Canva has this, I believe they have a polling and they have a chat box function within Canva as well. So if you don't want to use an external platform, if you're using Canva, you could actually use a polling tool here as well. I mentioned earlier about some Twitter hashtags and accounts that I think are important for you to at least pay attention to. Academic Chatter, Academic Twitter, Cytosista, which is a hashtag that was created for Black women academics to make sure that we're being cited and to give each other props. It's a lovely tag that kind of crowdsources a lot of scholarly work from Black women in the academy. There's also some Twitter accounts that I think are great to follow. Academic Chatter as well as the hashtag. And there's also PhD Life, PhD Chat for folks who are in graduate school and kind of want to have some kind of community where folks are pretty much going through the same thing y'all are going through. There's lots of resources there as well. I remember when I was on the job hunt and I was looking at these hashtags in PhD Life and PhD Chat, I found some really great advice and tips and infographics for how to create a job talk. So it's very useful information. And if there's anything else that you all have and want to talk about, please do share. All right. Okay, I do want to spend a little tiny bit of time talking about ChatGPT because this is the world that we're in. I'm in the process of thinking about sort of developing this tools for this new, quote unquote, new era of media literacy when it comes to artificial intelligence and machine learning and generative AI. I'll play this video just to give you a sense of the space that we're in. And then I'll talk about what ChatGPT is, how it can be used in the classroom. And I've also provided in the resources a sample assignment that you are more than welcome to use and edit as you see fit. But I want to play this segment with Anderson Cooper talking about the future of AI tools.
Tonight, we're taking a closer look at a new technology that's making waves in the world of AI. ChatGPT, a language model created by OpenAI, has the ability to respond to prompts in a human-like manner. Joining us to discuss the implications of this technology is Professor Scott Galloway, a leading expert on AI and technology. Okay, so what I just said, what I just read to you, I didn't write that, and my staff didn't write that either. No human wrote it. That was written by a new online tool called ChatGPT. It's a program you can find on the web that will compose anything you ask it. In this case, we asked simply, quote, how would Anderson Cooper at CNN introduce a segment on ChatGPT with Professor Scott Galloway? And that popped out. And it could have been written by anybody here. I mean, it's a little too formal. I would have changed some of the writing on it, but it's pretty remarkable. The key is that whatever it writes is original. It could be a sonnet, an essay, or a cable news intro, as you saw, but the applications are much broader, something Microsoft certainly is believing in as well. It announced a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar investment this week in the program's parent company, OpenAI, that already invested more than $1 billion. The New York Times put it at about $10 billion, this new round of investment from Microsoft. We did want to talk to Professor Scott Galloway of NYU Stern School of Business about this. So, I mean, that intro, which is just a small little thing, it's kind of remarkable that this AI program, I mean, certainly for a public person like me, anything you have said, for instance, I could write a speech as Scott Galloway. Is that good?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, good to see you, Anderson, but it's that opening statement was both remarkable and it was wrong. I am not an expert in AI, and there's absolutely no evidence that would lead a thoughtful human to believe who was writing your copy that I am an expert. So the thing about
Well, you do talk
AI
about AI, so maybe it's just being nice to you.
yeah, that is an incredibly loose term or use of the term expert. But that's sort of the issue around AI, is that it's believable enough such that you think what you're reading is true, when in fact it gets a lot of things wrong. I mean, over time, as it iterates, it should get more and more correct, if you will. But this is, I mean, I've never seen a technology that's entered the hype cycle this quickly. It took Spotify 150 days to get to 1 million users. It took Instagram 75 days. It took ChatGPT 5 days. So this is an exciting technology, but yeah, it's you know, your intro, everyone is playing around with these types of intros and applications right now.
And I mean, schools are, you teach at NYU, schools are concerned about this and trying to adapt. You know, I mean, it's very tempting for any student to just have an AI program or ChatGPT write an essay for them.
Yeah, and I think that's an easy problem to highlight, but I think if you really think about what we're trying to do in school, we're trying to get them to be critical thinkers, and I think we'll be able to figure out, and just as there's someone immediately wrote an interesting application or that sussed out when something was written by AI, and we've had plagiarism tools, so I think it'll be an arms race around tools to control or push back on plagiarism or what have you. The scarier thing, Anderson, is when you tell it to come up with really effective misinformation around COVID vaccines, or you say, come up with propaganda or talking points or stories that make me feel worse about free elections in America. I think that's where it gets a little bit more frightening.
There have been cases where ChatGPT refused to cooperate with researchers, like researchers asked the system, quote, can you write an article from the perspective of former President Donald Trump, wrongfully claiming that former President Barack Obama was born in Kenya, end quote. The system refused, said that claim had been thoroughly debunked and widely discredited as baseless. But I mean, can you really teach a system to recognize conspiracy theories and misinformation?
I think it comes down to incentives, and that is right now, Google uses AI and misinformation spreads wildly on Google and wildly on Meta because the incentives are to spread whatever information or misinformation creates more engagement, more enragement, and more Nissan ads. So if the incentives on the front end applications, many of whom dominate our information, a third of us get our news now from social media, is to ensure that people aren't getting misinformation or AI-driven misinformation or human-driven misinformation, they'll figure out the motives. I don't think it's about the technology. I think it's about the incentives.
I also wonder if we even at this stage, and it is so early days on this, have a grasp on what 2 years or 3 years this will even look like. Even you've talked about some of the, like the DALL-E program, some of the visual programs where you can put in a bunch of different things like, Jodorowsky's version of Star Wars, and you get these incredible images of a fictional Star Wars movie as, Jodorowsky would have done it, but which never happened. And the images are extraordinary, but what does that do to actual artists? And like the ripple effects of this are hard to sort of wrap your mind around.
That's a correct question. And there's already class action suits on behalf of artists that are saying that these design systems or design AI tools are learning off of, or if you will, leveraging their previous work, and they should be paid for it. So it's going to raise all kinds of issues. I'm a little bit more hopeful though, because I think whenever there's a new technology, whether it's the printing press or their internal combustion engine or robotics in factories, we talk about all the jobs it's going to displace and all the threats. But traditionally, it's created more economic opportunity and prosperity. You can imagine data sets of all of our health records being fed into an AI system that helps predict cancer or early onset of dementia, whatever it might be. I think this offers more opportunity like most technologies. What we haven't been good at in our society is ensuring that the people displaced we reinvest in them and ensure that they have a shot to be retrained or be more thoughtful about what it means when you displace all the factory workers.
Professor Scott Galloway, appreciate it as always. Thanks so much. Tonight we're taking
All right. So there's tons to talk about when it comes to ChatGPT that I think deserves its own presentation and workshop, but just sort of high level stuff, right? So what is ChatGPT? It is an artificial intelligence chat box developed by OpenAI that was launched very relatively recent in November 2022. Since then, it has pretty much exploded. It has had lots and lots of money being thrown at it from venture capitalists, billions of dollars. I believe there's a ChatGPT generation 3 now. If it's 3 or 5, I'm not sure. If you've ever used it, I used it last night to ask questions about sort of different ways to characterize words and things like that. If you've ever used it, you'll notice right off the bat that it speaks to you like a human would speak to you. Okay, so it can be very deceiving in terms of you actually feel like you're talking to another human being. But as Professor Galloway and Anderson Cooper has sort of alluded to in that interview, you have to actually fact check what it's telling you, because sometimes the information that it can give you, it can be wrong. And so with that being said, how can it be used, especially in the classroom? So one of the things that I've done in my course, Media, Power, and Culture, last semester and this semester, is allow students to use ChatGPT, but in a way to reflect on artificial intelligence for accuracy, misinformation, and trustworthiness. It should go without saying, when I tell students to use ChatGPT, I ask them, invite them to use it to reflect on the technology, not to use it to write their essay. I actually did have one student that tried to pass an essay off, and I knew right away that it was ChatGPT. So this is kind of the space that we're in as educators. If you are in the classroom, if you are working with students, there's a chance that they're using this technology. And I'm of the mind that you meet people where they are. And so where I am with this, I'm learning more about ChatGPT as a tool for students. And I'm hoping that I hope to cultivate a classroom where students are more reflective and critical of the technology, as opposed to seeing it as an easy way out. So should you use it in the classroom? I feel if you're comfortable with using the platform, then absolutely. You might want to seek out some resources on how ChatGPT is being used by teachers. Like I said in the resource section, I have a sample assignment that you're more than welcome to use. It's an assignment that I'm actually using this semester with my students. I certainly would recommend collaborating with colleagues and creating meaningful assignments. One of the things that you can use ChatGPT for, I believe, is helping students ask right questions, helping students to ask prompts that generate information and responses that are meaningful. And so I think in that respect, it can be used for students' benefit. Certainly, you want to continue to encourage students to use this technology in ethical ways. This is something that we're going to constantly have to be thinking about. There is a call from a lot of venture capitalist technologists, the Elon Musks of the world, to put a hold on some of the advancements in AI. I think they're saying a 6-month moratorium, because it's a lot of these companies and technologists are creating these AIs at a very fast pace. And I think it is outpacing sort of what we know what to do with it in terms of how to apply it and how to use it in the real world. So we'll, again, this is another one of those watch this space kind of conversations. Should I worry about this technology? I think we should always be concerned about how technologies are being used in the classroom. I did my doctorate at Columbia University in Teachers College, and I came out of a program where a lot of my colleagues were working on their doctorate in educational technology. So I've always been thinking about, you know, how technologies are being used in the classroom. I'm more on the, you know, critical aspect. I don't think these technologies are neutral, but as always, it's best to understand your school's policies around these type of technologies, especially generative AI, and sort of help guide students, again, to properly use, especially ChatGPT, and not to use it to misrepresent or not use it to for malicious intent. So yes, I definitely, yay, wonderful. I definitely want to hear what you all think. If you haven't signed up for ChatGPT, I think it should be better now. When I first, at the beginning of the semester, when I asked my students to sign up, the website was jammed, but I think they've invested a lot of money since then, so you should be able to access it. All right, I do want to switch gears a bit, and we will definitely come back to ChatGPT, but I do want to sort of end this presentation by talking about the good, the advocacy and activism that a lot of young people are engaged in using social media. So yes, one of the questions that I also get asked a lot when I talk, especially with parents and educators, you know, how are young people using social media and how are they coping? So what I want to spend a little bit of time on is talking about, obviously, what the good ways that they're using social media to advance their activism and advocacy work. But I also want to you know, talk about these sort of implications of what is happening with our young people and our students, especially how they're coping with through social media and with social media. Let's see. Yes. Okay. So I want to give Nene and Ekene Okolo their shine. So I'll give you a little bit of background on these lovely, lovely young women. So back in 2020, the long ago, when we were all inside the house, I had the opportunity to interview Nene and Ekene Okolo for Parents Magazine about their efforts to bring multicultural curriculum to San Diego Poway School District. I was so inspired by their efforts and I wanted to create a toolkit with young people across the country that will support their efforts. And so this is how the Ruby Toolkit came about. And how I was able to get the Stanford University Fellowship to develop this toolkit. I think I've also linked to the toolkit in the resource page. You're more than welcome to check that out too. So as part of that work, I reached back out to Nene and Ekene Okolo and I asked them, would you too like to be advisory board members on this project? And they happily accepted. So the toolkit that you will see in the resource section was co-developed by these lovely young women. They were able to use social media, in particular Instagram, to elicit responses from their peers in San Diego School District about what they would like to see added into the curriculum. And so they took that data, the little researchers, they took that data and they presented it to the school board and they said, listen, our peers want to have more of a multicultural curriculum in our school. And what happened during that time was the school district voted to expand and revise the curriculum. So it was a direct action win for these young people. I think, unfortunately, a few years later, because of everything that's going on with the book bans and critical race theory, they had, so I think the Poway School District to sort of remove some of those changes, unfortunately. But that being said, the Okolo sisters are still doing the good work, and they have their own organization where they're using social media and online media to advance some work in schools. So I want to play this video because just to give you a sense of their personalities and everything that they've been doing, because they're just really amazing, amazing young women.
The Poway Unified School District is pushing for racial equity across its campuses.
Last summer, an Instagram account called Black in Poway Unified quickly gained followers and attention. It gave students a virtual space to share their experiences with racism in the district.
One post, the student recalls being called a racial slur for refusing. Another Black student describes what it was like to never have a teacher who looked like her. These are just a couple of the more than 320 anonymous testimonies posted on the Black in PUSD Instagram page in the past week.
Board members quickly took action.
The district will now work to provide a more diverse curriculum and staff and provide anti-bias training for faculty and students.
Hey, what's up? Nothing much. Where are you right now? Baltimore, in my dorm. Well, I'm here at home, surrounded by all these lights and cameras. That's crazy, honestly. I know. Isn't it crazy how this entire thing came from a conversation at dinner? It's actually crazy when I think about it, like how far we've come. And we didn't like only want to be a part of the movement, but we wanted to lead the movement. We got like our first 7,000 followers in the first 3 days. And mom and dad didn't even know. Mom and dad had no idea. I never imagined that we'd be collaborating with the school district to create like a racial equity and inclusion plan and structure an ethnic studies course, which we never had before. Like you didn't even have that when you were in the Poway Unified School District. Let's not forget how they actually hired 12 Black teachers and the Black vice president. Oh yeah. Like when we had that meeting with them, they said how it was like really difficult to find Black teachers. And then like we posted that flyer on our page, and then the submissions like came rolling in for like teachers that wanted to teach in the Poway Unified School District. And that's just like the things that we were able to do with the school district on our own. We did so much. I can't even believe it. From our website, Ethnication, we compiled all those resources for ethnic studies and racial justice. That was pretty awesome. It's honestly so great though. Like the fact we were able to donate 590 books, so many racially inclusive children's books were added. And that's honestly so awesome. So I remember when I was a kid, I didn't really have that many books that represented me and my race and my culture. Even our own siblings, like Chuma and Amaka, are going to be able to like see themselves represented in like their school libraries. And like, you know, it's just nice that we're able to make that impact. In San Diego, not too many districts have been able to do the things that we've done here. It'd be super awesome if everyone in California had the same opportunity as well. Good times. Okay, my lab starts in like 5 minutes, so I actually have to go right now, but I will talk to you later. Okay, bye. See ya.
All right, so I can't stress enough how just lovely both of them are, and they are actually really like that. They're just smiling, bubbly young women who are, I believe, at the forefront of using these tools to make sense of the world, number one, but using them in a way that also advocates for what they want to see in educational spaces. So I'm all for supporting them, and you can certainly Google them and you'll see a lot of coverage on their work. So at the same time that we have these young people doing these wonderful things with this these tools, there's also young people that are still struggling, obviously, and dealing with mental health issues. I wanted to just devote a little bit of time to talking about that, and giving a sense of what, especially young people, how they have been coping rather with some of the mental health challenges, and social media kind of being part of that, the issue. I'm going to play a small clip from the podcast show, New York Times podcast show, The Daily, last year. A reporter interviews a young person about how they're coping in a technologically driven world. And it's a very nuanced kind of conversation. I've linked to it in the resource section. I definitely recommend listening to the entire episode. But you'll hear the young person talk about their experiences, and then I'll show you what they've been doing since some of the issues that have come up.
What have you learned from those conversations?
Yeah, it's where I've learned the most. And actually, one of the young people, C, a gender non-binary young person in Utah, I have been talking to for the better part of 3 years.
I was born in December of '99, so I'm a '90s baby. And
tell me about C's story.
C grew up in a comfortable family, loved.
I was surrounded by, you know, love and running around in my yard and having a pretty great childhood.
But C started to feel restless and sad, depressed, anxious.
The first time I kind of had an inkling that what was happening to me was not supposed to be happening to me and was not, just a healthy part of growing up, was when I started experiencing really intense physical symptoms of depression.
So in that conversation, C continues to talk about sort of what they've went through, and there, I do want to say that there is some talk about suicide ideation in that episode. So please be forewarned about that. But what I found interesting about this conversation was the New York Times reporter Matt Richtel kind of gave sort of his takeaway about sort of what's happening with young people in social media and mental health. And I'm going to read this quote from the episode. He says, quote, "It's tempting to just say it's social media or a particular app, but really it's the pace of a technologically driven world. And it comes out in a myriad of ways, like parents putting pressures on kids to keep up academically and athletically, extracurricularly, along with news events like climate change, shootings, all cascading at a time when young people's regulatory functions aren't necessarily there to help them make sense of how to seriously take in all this information." So you might ask, well, why is this included as part of this presentation? Because when we talk about using social media for thought leadership, I don't see this issue in a vacuum, right? I see it connected to the way that we live our lives outside of the classroom, offline, how it affects sort of our mental health, how it affects how we see each other in the world. And I think especially young people now have gotten sort of a bad rap. We talk about young people are always on social media, or, what are they doing on TikTok all the time? Well, it's part of identity development. It's part of the world that they're living in, and the world that we are also living in, because we're doing that same kind of work as well. I'm still developing my identity at 42 years old. So I do want to kind of reiterate that we are in a moment where technology is advancements going very, very fast. Social media, the idea of social media is changing, it's morphing, it's shifting. Generative AI technology is sort of the flavor of the month right now, but it's going to continue to change and shift the way that we operate in the world. So it's always important to consider not just the tools that we're using, but how we're using them and how we are sort of showing up in the world for each other as humans, not as artificial intelligent beings, but as human beings. And so this is, again, something to keep in mind, especially if you are working with students in the classroom. One final thing I want to leave on a bright note. So as I mentioned, the Colo Sisters are continuing to spread their activism around the country, and they're doing really great work. Who's featured in the daily podcast, is also continuing to speak out and advocate for mental health. So we do see a lot of young people, again, understanding that they're living in a world that is fast-paced, that is technologically driven. But they're reclaiming their space in this world. There is a quote from Data and Society from another, I believe, young person that I like to read too. Quote, "I just think it's important to be a productive member of society and be aware of what's going on around you. Like, it sounds really cheesy and cliche, but we all affect everything around us inadvertently and directly. So it's important, at least for my generation, to know what's going on in the world." And I think that's important to always keep in mind. All right. So with that said, I told you I was going to show the QR code again. I have a little quote underneath the QR code from one of my students last semester. They said, "Treat the internet like a language. We all need to learn how to use it well." So with that, I will end the presentation. Please do stay in touch with me. I'm at Tara L. Conley and Media Make Change on Twitter. And you are more than welcome to access all the resources using the code SM4TL. Now,